Let me welcome everybody, our panelists and attendees, to another session of DOSCOTalks. It's my pleasure to introduce Arjun Malhotra. Arjun is an industry IT veteran, establishing HCL in 1975 in what appears to be very much a Microsoft-esque story. So I'm very excited about hearing about that. And then, of course, he's had a tremendous run in the sphere of information technology, and he has also spent a lot of time imparting his knowledge towards Indian education, and has been involved with the Board of Governors at IIT Kharagpur and various other foundations. Arjun, welcome to DOSCOTalks. Very happy to have you here today. And I would also like to thank our co-moderators, Shubho Ghosh and Amit Soni, for setting this up. Shubho, Amit, what can I say? Thank you very much. The DSOBS New York has been stepping up with these talks very frequently. We're very grateful. Thank you again, and excited that you've taken out the time again to moderate this talk. So without further ado, please, everybody enjoy the session, and do send in your questions as and when you like. Shubho, of course, will pick them. Don't wait till the end. Over to you, Shubho.
Thank you so much, Tarun, and welcome everyone. Want to, of course, right at the onset, thank Mr. Amit Sani for helping organize and making this happen, and welcome Mr. Arjun Malhotra to this DOSCOTalk. Absolute pleasure to have you on this talk, Arjun, and looking forward for the next hour to discuss your journey. And in many ways, well, in most ways, you've sort of led the way for the IT services industry in India as we know it today. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how that your personal experiences and have sort of shaped in many ways the way the Indian IT industry has evolved from the early days of HCL right down to TechSpan and Headstrong and all your current initiatives. So with that said, can I request you to give a little bit of an open-ended sort of bio of yourself from the beginning, from the founding of HCL to Headstrong and the early days, and then the sale to Genpact. If you could just quickly tell us a little bit about that and your journey, that'll be a great start. Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you, Shubho, and thank you, Tarun, for the introduction. And good morning, good evening to everyone who's on the call. You know, I've been in the IT industry now for some 51 years. I graduated from IIT Kharagpur in 1970, doing a bachelor's degree in electronics and electrical communication engineering. I decided to stay on in India, and I joined DCM, Delhi Cloth and General Mills Company Limited, as a senior management trainee, and was fortunate because they decided a year after I joined to get into electronics. And so I got 1 year out of college, I was pulled into the new division called DCM Data Products, which is part of their textile group, and told that I would either handle production and R&D or sales and marketing, depending on who they could get. They got someone from Indian Telephone Industries for manufacturing. And so I ended up looking after 1 year out of college, supposedly setting up national sales for this new product called an electronic calculator, which was just coming out at that time. Worked in DCM for 5 years. We designed our own computer. Unfortunately, because of the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act at that time, DCM, being the fourth largest company in the country, was supposedly advised not to get into the area of computers, whereas we were making programmable calculators, and we saw no difference. So 6 of us decided to leave. Microprocessors were just coming out. We thought they were going to make a major change. IBM and ICL were selling really old technology machines in India. So we thought, let's go out and, just change the world, so to say. And that's how HCL got formed, basically, in my grandmother's Barsati in Delhi. And of
It's
course, yeah.
amazing to see, how quickly technology changes. If I may make that quick statement, you originally started off with calculators, right? Which is obviously a given in today's computers and the way things work today. So can you talk to us a little bit about what happened from there to HCL? You guys started off with hardware, but then quickly pivoted to software and IT services because you saw that was really where the world was headed. So can you talk about what was in your mind at that point, how you identified these sort of tech transitions before or during the time they actually happened? What's the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so we were a hardware company for a long time. And, because we were one of the few people who were recruiting in India in some kind of volume, we used to get people from the IITs and some of the RECs. We had 16 colleges that we had identified, and that's where we recruited. And so we spent a lot of time building our image there and in the 3 IIMs, Bangalore, Calcutta, and Ahmedabad. What happened was, our belief was that engineers are for R&D. Programmers came out of places like NIIT. So you really didn't need engineers to do application programming. And that's why HCL was a little late in getting into IT services, basically. People like Wipro and TCS was already there. Wipro had got in much earlier. We had made a multiprocessor machine based on Unix because we had Unix source codes. And McKinsey came and told us that, hey, your machine costs about $100,000 or the equivalent if you went to the US. Your competition there, like MIPS and Pyramid, cost about $1 million. So why? And there's a gap for that kind of machine. So we actually came to the US in late '88, early '89 to sell hardware. And there's the story. What happened? We immediately got an order for OEM order for $50 million from this company called Fortune. And we were porting their OS on our hardware. When they got acquired by a company called, I now forget the name, but there was a Texas company that acquired them that wanted only to work on Intel chips, whereas our multiprocessor worked on a Motorola 68000. And so all of a sudden, that $50 million order became a piece of paper. Now, I was new to the US. If I had been here for a while, I would have gone legal and made some money on that. But coming from India, you don't have that mindset. And so I thought, hey, what do I do? Basically, I was sent to shut down the operation. What I decided to do was, and again, a little bit of background here. When you port an operating system or when you port a database or an enabling technology like a compiler on your hardware, you got to pay the company, whether it's Micro Focus or Informix or Unify, you got to pay them a porting fee. In our case, the porting wasn't a simple thing. We had to extend their software to take advantage of our multiprocessor hardware. And so the deal we'd done with them was that we won't pay you for porting, but I'll give you my engineers free who understand this, and they will do the extensions on your software, which is your IP, and you keep it. But that way our machine will be able to run that software, that enabling software. When we decided to get out of hardware, I called up all these people and said, I'm pulling my engineers back because I don't need to do it anymore. All of them said they would pay for it because they needed those extensions. And that technically is how we got into services. And so, it's strange. That's the way. And we stayed in the R&D part of services for a few years until one of our employees who had immigrated to Australia landed up here in the US, and he had come with, I think, Oracle apps or SAP background. And he persuaded me that we should get into apps. And he wanted a job, basically. So I told him, okay, as long as you can pay for yourself, I'll give you a job. And that's how HCL got into the application part of IT services. Of course, things have changed now.
No, absolutely. And you guys were doing Agile before Agile became a buzzword today. So that's good to see that you pivoted your strategy from hardware to software and IT services. So, but quick question here. Do you see software eating the world in the sense that, hardware is becoming more and more of a commodity, as we can see today. Even companies like Hewlett Packard are struggling. It's all being outsourced to low-cost regions in Asia, and you're seeing a lot of the emerging tech companies today. They're primarily high-end, value-added software in the US. So you've got this bifurcation of hardware going to Asia and software, high-end software being developed in the US. Is that the trend you saw even back then, which led you to that decision, or was it like you mentioned? Intel was essentially getting into the processor world, was the big 500-pound gorilla in the room, and companies like Motorola were being sidelined, and that essentially meant that semiconductors essentially led the sale, no longer hardware. I mean, how did you think about that?
So, my belief is that it's the market that drives this. Asia, large parts of Asia were not a big market. The markets were in the US and Western Europe, so to say. And so really they drove the innovation because they understood, the people there understood their markets a lot better. Most Indian IT services company technically had a very low SG&A, as we call it, because they didn't have too many people on the ground who could give them feedback as to what the market was doing. They got their experience mainly from doing jobs for, say, 10 insurance companies, and then you learn insurance in a way. That has changed. Markets in India and China and Asia are now becoming, the domestic markets are becoming large. And so you're starting to see innovation. In fact, iFlex was probably the first example of someone innovating banking software for a country like India, and then people taking it all over the world where you needed that kind of functionality. So that's one thing. That's what I believe, that the market drives innovation. I know the Indian market better than someone from the US can tell me about the Indian market. And so if I innovate a product for India, it's a large enough market, it makes sense for me to make that investment. I think the second thing you've got to remember is that hardware has gone way beyond software. Look at medical science. I mean, today I can give you images that the doctors, beyond what the doctors can actually analyze. And so we are moving back to software to try and help us analyze this. Artificial intelligence is one of the things, machine learning, we are looking at it. Today we need more compute power. People are talking about quantum computing, completely new concept. It's just a whole lot of new things happening. I mean, when you look at genetics, the DNA, RNA type stuff, it's all coming out of computers. In fact, look at cars. More than 50% of the value of a car or the cost of a car today is IT. And it's not hardware, it's software. And that's what's driving everything. So you're looking at zero defect software that's coming into cars, that's going into space. So there's a lot of things that software is going to drive and will keep driving as we go along. And, there is going to be a shortage of people. I mean, what used to be, in my view, India's biggest problem at one time, when I was growing up, everyone said population is our biggest problem. It pulls down our GDP or whatever. Now you're saying people are our biggest asset, right? And if we can train them and get them going, then it'll just be, I mean, I think we can sort of quote unquote rule the world if we can just get our people trained, do a good job of educating them and skill training them, especially in things like programming. And so, I really think India's, on a good wicket.
That's perfect. Thank you, Arjun, for that. Just going back to your experiences for another few minutes, though. Can you talk us about Headstrong and TechSpan and what happened there and a partnership with Genpact? Did you essentially see another kind of paradigm shift, if you will, into a BPO essentially from hardware to IT services, now into the world of BPO? So can you talk us through what happened there and what you saw there and how was the journey? Thanks.
So I go back to the story. When I was in HCL, we discovered that US companies were able to get a better premium than companies from India. And there seemed to be no reason because we were doing the same business. I mean, it's like I used to always ask my customers that if General Motors came to you and said that the car is being made in Mexico, do you ask them for a discount? Yet when you said, I'm going to do the software in India, everyone expected a discount. And so what we thought was, let's start a company in the US that is, sort of with a backend in India, but has more US orientation. And let's see if I can get a better bill rate, a better billing number from my customer. And so we said we'll have a consulting front end and a IT services back end. Fortunately, unfortunately, whatever word you want to use, when we started in 99, the bubble was there. I don't know how many people remember the bubble where everyone felt that e-commerce was going to take over and brick and mortar is going to die. And, so within 6 weeks of starting, the pressure from our potential clients was to get into e-commerce. And so that we just pivoted around completely. In fact, I still have my t-shirt. We started on January 1st, 99. In June of 99, we did $1 million in the month. We did 15.4 in our first year, million, and we did 67 million in our second year and made $4 million of profit, which is why we survived, because we didn't go public. Since we were profitable, people were discounting us. And that was, remember the bubble, those were crazy days. In any case, what happened is after that, the bubble burst, everything slowed down. From a $67 million company, we became a $30 million company overnight, basically. And fortunately, we had money in the bank. And fortunately, we kept ourselves cash neutral. And I attribute that to bootstrapping HCL for many years in India. And except for the 9/11 month, when we were not cash positive because a lot of our billing got held up from New York. But we decided that the way the industry was going to go was going to be domain specific, that I needed to not talk to the CIO, but to talk to the business manager, discuss a business problem, and then leverage technology to provide the solution. And that the business manager would by and large be agnostic to which technology you use. And so that's what we did. And in the meanwhile, we were setting up an offshore center for the erstwhile James Martin and Company, which had become, they changed their name to Headstrong. And, one thing led to another. They wanted to take a stake in us. We wanted to take a stake in them. We just decided to sort of merge. And, basically, I think October 2003, TechSpan and Headstrong merged. They were much bigger than us. They were 60 some million. We were 30 odd million. I think in 3 months, they wanted me to take over as the temporary CEO unless I made a 2-year commitment, which I did. And so that's how I ended up running Headstrong. Fortunately, my COO, my number 2 guy who was COO, later on became CEO, is also a DOSCO, Sandeep Sahai. And, the company did really well. We focused just on the capital markets, investment banking. And at one time, we would proudly say that the top 20 investment banks on Wall Street are our clients. And why do we need any other clients? And then, of course, that 2008, 2009 slowdown hit. And you remember that financial slowdown. And suddenly, there weren't 20 investment banks on Wall Street. Merrill Lynch went, a number of big banks, Lehman Brothers went. And but a lot of those people went to mid-sized companies, and mid-sized companies started becoming more ambitious. And so, we morphed ourselves, ultimately got to $220 million size. Morgan Stanley was our largest customer at about 60 odd million. But we were known to be domain-specific specialists. Did a lot of commodity work, but led with domain. And, fought all the big guys. And we were considered, how should I put it, better in that market for domain work than any of them. Basically, Genpact wanted to get into the IT services part of it. And that's how it happened. We went out looking for money. We weren't looking to sell. We got an offer we couldn't refuse. And since most of the other co-founders with me at Headstrong were first-time entrepreneurs, I thought it's only fair to, take the deal because we got a really sweet deal from Genpact. And that's really how Headstrong, sort of got sold to Genpact.
And after the sale, were you involved at all with the Genpact side of things, or did you move on to other initiatives?
Yeah, so we sold in May 2011. I stayed on on their request, basically just in case they needed me for some transition till the end of 2011. But most of my team, they had to sign 2-year contracts. I didn't want to sign a 2-year deal. I wanted to actually get into, working, how should I put it, leveraging technology, which is something I knew, to try and help the economically underprivileged in India in education and healthcare. And so I mentored some technology companies and worked with some ex-HCL people and others who I knew who were looking at doing something in the healthcare and education space. So we actually, few years later, from another DOSCO, Vimlendu Verma, who unfortunately had picked up some medical issues and had wanted to take it easy, we bought out a company called Magic Software in India, and we're doing work on education in that. In fact, a lot of work on the what we call accessibility. It really isn't big in India right now, but at some stage it will be needed. So what it means is, adapting digital content, educational content for the learning handicap. Now, whether you have visual handicap or you have a hearing handicap or, you have ADHD or whatever. The US claims to have some 20-25% of their kids who have some kind of learning disability. And so that's the market right now. I'm sure we have lots of kids in India with problems like that. But in India, the problem is we are still trying to, how should I put it? We are still addressing the people who have no learning disabilities. We're trying to get them into the system. So I think that'll wait a few years. I'm working with the Delhi government, and they're saying in a couple of years, they'll be ready to start addressing that part of their kid population. So that's one thing. And on healthcare, we were working and we are working on telemedicine. Not just telemedicine, we're looking at, and I can spend a little time on that because basically what we looked at was with the economy picking up in India, the number of people who can afford to come into the healthcare system was going up by some 12 or 18% on a fairly large base of patients. But the doctors are only going up by 4%. And, if I need, and every doctor I know is overworked today. And if I need more doctors, I invest today, they'll only come up 10 years later. And I don't see the investments going in today. So we assumed that doctor time would be in short supply for the next X years. And so we looked at where doctors are spending non-patient facing time and how we could reduce that so they could see more patients. And basically it started with they write the prescription, can I automate it? They give them an electronic health record. You then, help them. You can do if you can do the vitals for them, do the triaging, then with data, I can actually give them a diagnostic that might help them. And that's exactly what we're doing. Then for chronic patients, if I monitor them, the doctor will be more efficient, can spend less time. So we're doing work like this. Our initial, it's now been a few years, but our results today are showing that we are saving doctors 30 to 50% of their time. And as the AI ML system at the back picks up more information for doctors who disagree with our diagnostics or feel our diagnostic is wrong and we update the system, I expect in certain disciplines to go up to 70 to 90% of the doctor's time that will be saved. The target is for your second call, yeah, we should do it in 3 minutes. Sorry.
Got it. So it sounds like it's a great mix of EHR and AI triage, if you will. Is it more skewed towards software, or is this a process thing that you actually have doctors at the back end helping the doctors on the front end?
Well, we have both because some people need to get consultation. So we have doctors in call centers, so to say, You know, about 80% of them are 1 year, 2 year type people, and 20% of them are senior retired people who, are consultants. So we get a mix, we provide that. But basically, it's software by and large. And every month and every quarter, depending on the discipline and how robust we are there, we have a group of specialists who sit down and update the system. So that, because, if I put too much in the system, then it tends to get slow and people don't like to wait for an answer. And so we try and just take on what is more common and easy. And we leave the one-offs to the doctor to diagnose. We just give him indication. And we are now working, we've got, it's funny, we've got a clinic in Manchester in the UK working on it. We are working with some hospitals, including Stanford here in the US. We're talking to them. And of course, there's a number of states in India are putting this in, number of private practice doctors in their clinics, number of big hospitals, big and medium-sized hospitals are putting it in. So it's becoming quite good. And we had planned to do it at a fairly low cost. It's 15 rupees, 25 rupees a transaction. We wanted it to be affordable for everyone. And the volumes are quite crazy. We have some 8.5 million plus patient records already on the system. So it's good. It's going to help us as we go forward because, excuse me, I can analyze that and get a lot of data that would be available.
Got it. It sounds like a very interesting product. Just I was curious, logistically speaking, Arjun, have you had any challenges given that you live in Silicon Valley in California? Sounds like a lot of the customers are international and the development is in India. And any logistical challenges and also reason why you chose Palo Alto or I think Saratoga, right, is where you stay? Any particular reason? Is it more personal or is there an edge in staying there to manage these operations?
So, I have a home in Delhi and I have a home here. My son lives in Delhi and he is a DOSCO too. And my daughter lives here. So we technically have two homes. We would have spent a lot more time in India, just that my grandkids are here and my wife, I can't seem to, obviously I too want to spend time with them. So we sort of go up and down and it's half and half. I used to, before COVID, do it 4, 5, 6 times a year, going up and down. It's been a lot less with COVID. I was in India for about 9 months and now I've been here for about the same period of time. But yeah, when things get back to normal, it'll be up and down again. So, and I've done this since 1989. So I don't, I don't see myself as technically you're resident for taxes in a particular jurisdiction or a particular country. But, that's your home country for taxes. You end up paying taxes in both. But really, ultimately, India is home, and that's where I plan to retire.
Got it. Great. And when we last talked, you also mentioned another initiative you have with hospitals. In fact, in Bihar, you talked about the kind of if I can joke about it, the Uber of autos. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, the new AIIMS in Patna, it's no longer new, but when we were working, it was new. They were setting up their infrastructure, their buildings and stuff. The head of AIIMS Patna, he was very keen to start, he had his doctors, so we started telemedicine with them. And so while we worked at AIIMS Patna, we noticed a lot of patients, you'd come to the hospital in autos. Now, going from Delhi, you're not used to patients coming in autos. They normally come in an ambulance or a car. And so one questioned that, and I was told that, look, because of the crowded streets, the narrow streets in Patna, autos can get through cars and ambulances find it much more difficult. And so the director of the institute there, AIIMS, he asked us to develop an app in Hindi, which we did pro bono at that time. And he then spent a number of weekends at their local Central Park equivalent and downloaded it on the smartphones of as many auto drivers as he could. And basically, technically what happens is if you got the app, you are in Patna, you fall down, you break your hand, you press the app, there's an option which says, I am injured. You press, I am injured, and the guy monitoring this knows for your location. He knows where these 10,000 autos are that are going around the city. He'll call an auto near you and say, go pick that person up and get him to the hospital. And so, it's very much like Uber in a way. Uber does something somewhat similar. But the director at AIIMS Patna very proudly used to say that I have 10,000 ambulances that are roaming around the city all the time that I can call at any time. And the ambulance drivers liked it because it gave them a softer image. And even if they had a passenger, most passengers were okay with getting offloaded to take someone to the hospital. And in fact, at the second stage, we were planning to go in and train some of these auto drivers on first aid, very much like we did in Dune, if you remember, getting qualified for first aid and getting a first aider certificate to go on midterms and stuff. That's what we were planning to do. The director got, he finished his term. He moved out he actually came to King George Medical University in Lucknow. The new director was not that keen on telemedicine and stuff. So it cooled off a little bit, but these things happen. And that's how that happened. We are planning to take that app nationally. We have to change the language because it's written in Hindi. I've got to make it in regional languages. And at some stage, we will take it out to the other states. Maybe even to cities like Delhi, where autos still get through and ambulances have a problem, especially with our jams, our traffic jams. Yeah, but that was interesting. I call it relevant technology, very relevant to India. That's how we've got to look at a lot of our problems.
Absolutely. And do you see this expanding to other cities across India?
Yes. Just don't have the bandwidth in a startup to do it. We got so tied up with doing our basic thing on telemedicine and monitoring and stuff. But at some stage, yes, absolutely. We do plan to. I'm still, right now we have the Bihar government wants us to put telemedicine into 25,000 villages before the end of July, before the monsoon really isolates them. And so you can imagine a startup having to recruit those people, train those people, put them out there. So, it just takes all our time. So we haven't prioritized it as yet. Would love to do it. We'll do it at some point.
Got it. So shifting gears here a little, Arjun, I've had a few questions come in, so I'm going to read them out. One is from Vipul Swaroop, and he's asking about how attractive is the small and medium business segment for software sales in India?
That's a tough question to answer. A lot of people have tried in the MSME market to make money. It is a difficult market to make money, but the market is there. And if you have the right kind of product and the right way to sell it, you can make money, but it's not very easy.
Got it.
It's a lot of people have failed in trying to make money from that market, but it is a big market.
Yeah, to be fair though, I mean, I think that market is pivoting a lot to the SaaS model where the software becomes a lot cheaper to implement by the month, by the user. And of course, some people doing it more from another model. So any thoughts around that? Do you see a pivot more towards SaaS software here?
Absolutely. And that is probably the only way it will go into that market. Two problems with that. One is collecting money every month from them is going to be a problem. So you need to find a way of making sure you don't spend more money trying to collect your money than what you're collecting, number one. Number two, most of them will want a high level of customization. They're still not used to adapting their process to the software rather than want the software to adapt to their process. And number three, actually, there are three problems. Lots of them don't have robust processes. I'll give you an example. When many years ago, we were asked to get the invoicing done at a fairly large organization called Hamdard. And so the sales guy agreed. But when the systems people went in to implement it, they discovered that there was a little slip of paper on which they wrote stuff in Urdu that went around. And that was the basis on which invoicing got done. So it took us about 3 or 4 months to first set their process up then get it to do invoicing. And in those days, the margins were really large, so we could afford to do it. Today, people have got a lot more knowledgeable, educated, whatever word you want to use. So you're going to have to do this at limited margin. That becomes. I'm sorry, I think there are two.
Yeah, I think we have a little Zoom bomb here, so apologies for that. Someone, it has your name on it, so whoever else is signed on, can we request them to mute and put that video off? Thanks.
Maybe, yeah, Neha can do it. I see 3 windows with my name on them. Only one of them is mine. I don't know who the others are.
It's a very popular name. Arjun, one more question came in about privacy issues to patient medical records and their analytics. So what are your thoughts around privacy issues related to these records?
No, I think they're very important, and we do that. So what we do is, the minute the record comes to us, we codify it differently and send it off to the database, and the code is maintained separately. And like financial records, countries don't like their medical data to be taken outside. And so that's exactly what we do. And then we work with Azure, we work with AWS, we work with, people at the back who are already HIPAA compliant, and they are the ones that maintain the privacy. We don't have to do it. We don't maintain our own data centers if we don't want to, unless a country wants us to maintain it there. So that's technically what we're doing.
Got it. Thank you so much. And that's a great segue, by the way, to Azure and AWS and GCP. So if I can take you back to your IT consulting hat, put on your IT consulting hat, how do you see that world evolving? Are you seeing, back in the early days, of course, there was the labor cost arbitrage. That was followed by a period where you mentioned, of course, where you had this vertical specialization. So you guys did a lot of financial services to Wall Street. Of course, Genpact famously did the back end for GE, not just IT services, but the BPO side as well. And so after the age and era of, this vertical specialization of, customized software deployment, not even development, I'd say deployment, that was over. Now we're in this world of cloud compute, where you've got 3 large players. Largest AWS probably has 2/3 of the share, then you've got the other guys in on it. Where does that leave room for and space for the IT services companies? So, Wipro, Genpact, TCS, HCL, of course, in Europe, you've got Capgemini, Accenture in the US. How do you see, and DXC, of course, very famously, the former CSC. How do you see that world evolving in the age of the cloud?
So, there are 2 things. The first is, a lot of your files that you have today on computers have to be migrated to the cloud. That's not a trivial task, right? Then you have to make sure the security on the cloud is available. See, earlier you physically had this computer in your office, so you felt it was secure, mentally, psychologically, whatever. Now you're putting it into some place somewhere else, and you're dependent on someone else for that security. That tends to be a little more worrisome. And so how do you take your files that are on your computer today, that is in-house, and put it onto the cloud? And so, data centers was one step. Cloud is a sort of second step. The data center, after all, data centers were like clouds. They were outside your office, but in a premises that you knew. Cloud is because it could be anywhere. AWS could have it wherever they want, not necessarily where you can go physically walk down and have a look at it in the same city. So I think, one is that's a big business. And, the answer that I just give everyone the same thing. Everyone wanted to know after Y2K, what's going to happen. Normal business is going to continue the way it is. Markets are going to change. People are going to want to get into new markets. People are going to want different data to take decisions. It's a lot of things that will keep going the way they're going. And cloud is just one technology that'll come. Second is, as you look at compute power going up, all the time, and quantum computing might give it a significant boost in one shot, you're going to be able to address problems that you cannot address today, more complicated problems. So today, if you're solving an issue which has 10 variables and you're optimizing it on that basis, tomorrow you might be able to optimize it to 50 variables, 100 variables, 1,000 variables, some big number, where you can then take decisions in a very different way. So I don't think computers are, I don't think IT services, I don't think any of them are going to go away. And I mean, look at AI, what AI is going to do. And, again, as we look at, there's a lot of talk about stem cells and the moral, ethical issues behind what should be done, what shouldn't be done. I think you're going to see similar problems coming up in AI. Just read Asimov and his whole robot series, iRobot and robot series, and look at some of the issues that he brings up. They are very real in today's world, and we better start thinking about them. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot of problems coming up where machines can go haywire without really knowing it, just because they've been programmed that way. Right.
Got it. Yeah. No, that's very interesting. And also to your point, IT services companies, so the HCLs of the world, the Wipros, there's a one-time large effort, lift and shift operations from data center to the cloud. But to your point, that's not the end of it, that's the beginning, because then you have to maintain those sources, and then you have all sorts of security, software security issues. So in that environment, in that new world where you have sort of new demand being created by security, by maintenance of data in the cloud, do you see any particular companies as super interesting to either invest in, or any technologies that one should be focused on and watch out for the next generation of growth? Thank you.
Yeah, it depends on what your time frame is and what your objective is. If you're investing to make money on the stock market, then you look at it a little differently. If you're a kid in college and you want to know what career I should choose that in 5-7 years will grow so quickly that I'll be able to grow quickly in that industry, then you look at it a little differently. But if I was a kid in college today, I would look at genetics, biotech, that whole bioinformatics. That area is something that's really going to go up. And I think it's slow only because doctors don't understand technology, or never used to. Let me put it that way. They are starting to get more relevant with technology today, because a lot of your diagnostics in medical science is technology. And I think so that is one big area. If you've got a slightly longer time frame, you might want to look at nanotechnology. I think space and all are pretty much there. They're going to be there for a long time. Normal IT is going to be there. In fact, IT is now infrastructure. It's basic. It's not no longer, so it's like a road, like you have roads and buildings. I think IT is reached that level of, you have to look at it that way. It's no longer something that is nice to have. I don't think anyone can talk without IT today. And look at our kids growing up. I mean, they know, I know my grandkids are much smarter on tablets and stuff than I am. And I'm supposed to be, X years in this industry. But they seem to be much more comfortable using that technology than, I still remember, and I'll give you this example, when the first computer, it wasn't a PC, but it was one of our own computers in HCL, came home. My daughter, who's now 47, was 3 years old. And my mother, she looked at it and said, in her lifetime, she's seen the radio, the telephone, the television come into the house. And now she's seeing a computer come in. She was asking me that when her granddaughter, that's my daughter, is her age, what would be in the house? And I told her at that time that if I knew I wouldn't be working, I'd write a book and make my money. But it's very difficult. Technology is moving just too fast. It is, it just is very difficult to predict what will happen. Who would have thought that India, from where you had to wait 10-15 years to get a telephone line, you would have so many millions of cell phones available, and communication will become so easy. So, I just want to leave a few thoughts. Just think about, I'm talking about India. We talk about this large number of illiterate people who can't read and write, but they can all speak. And today, why can't I have a verbal World Wide Web where I can speak into my phone and say, let me know what the weather is like in my local language, and it goes to the web, pulls out the data and gives you an answer back in a voice, in verbal form. And so when we talk digital divide, why would that not take care of the digital divide?
Second that's been one of my closest friends, and I call her Alexa these days.
Yep. But again, you can do that from looking at storage. Storage is so simple. Google gives you 10 GB free or some number like that for everyone who's on a computer, right? Why can't I talk to Google and say, for every individual in India, give me a mailbox, maybe 1 GB or maybe even less, and let everyone, even with a feature phone, not only a smartphone, be able to leave a voice message for whoever they like and pick up voice messages from whoever wants to leave a message for them. Right.
I think that's a great point. I think there's a company called Nuance that does a lot of what you're talking about. And, to your point, this is an area of growth for people who can't, or don't want to, for whatever reason, type. You've got voice recognition, facial recognition, all of that growing as part of the World Wide Web, whether it's Alexa or Siri or something else. Arjun, we have a couple more questions come in. One from Arush Sugani. Actually, two questions from him. One is along the lines of what we just talked about. Do you think as hardware evolves, are PCs going to die out? Is this the end of PCs as we know it? And the second is, a lot of manufacturers are working on device as a service, but it has not picked up in companies the way it should. How do you feel about that market going forward?
So the first question is, I don't think PCs will die out. I think there's so much software available on PCs that till we find an alternative with all that software and with the number of people doing developments on PCs and stuff, till that goes down, that OS is not going to go away. Basically, I think PCs will get faster and faster until you get those applications available. You see them on phones. So technically, a smartphone or a tablet would replace a PC that runs either Android or iOS. But other than that, PCs are not going to go away too quickly. There's just too much software, application software that's available on them. And on hardware as a service, basically, yes, I think there should be a big market, but I think you've got to address it very differently to the way you're addressing software as a service. So if you're trying to just follow the same norms, it's going to be a problem. I think when you look at hardware as a service, it's a misnomer. The hardware is, pretty much commodity today. It's the embedded stuff in the hardware, if I'm assuming there's no application on it, that is going to be your differentiator. So ultimately it is software, but it's embedded in the hardware. And you'll have to write, if you're doing it for specific work, you'll have to write EPROMs or FPGAs or whatever, and put them in the hardware so that they become cost efficient. If it's volume, you can go with the chip. If it's low volume, you can, part of it, you can do a EPROM. It all depends on how you address that particular problem. I don't think we have the answers as yet. People have to fool around with it a little bit before you get an answer and see what's acceptable to most people. But remember, today, by writing software, I can adapt most hardware to doing whatever I want. Yes, the latency will be high because software takes time. If you embed it, it goes much faster. But yeah, that's the way it is. And again, I can give you an anecdote. Many years ago, our first machine in India, computer was an 8-bit, where we had a basic interpreter. And now there was a guy from, I think, Raw or someplace in the government who was doing some random number generator where intermediate answer was 150 digits or whatever he was doing. He said he gave us this Fortran program, and said, if you can solve this for me on your computer, I'll buy it. So we spent a fair amount of time, wrote it in a basic interpreter, gave it to him, showed him the thing. It took 1.5 hours to give him one number that he wanted generated. And so we said, here it is, now give me the order. And he started laughing. And he said, no, I should have qualified it. If you can give me the number being generated in less than a minute, not in 1.5 hours, then I'll give you the order. So of course, we came back, everyone was very disappointed. One of our initial sales, supposed sales, came back and we were talking about it in the office. And one of our R&D engineers heard it and he said, show me the problem. And he wrote it in assembler. And I don't know how many of you know the word assembler, but that was the machine closest to machine level language that we could program on the big IBM machines. And the same problem we were able to do in 35 seconds. So just to tell you the latency that we put on the hardware or the compute power by making it friendly for users, let's put it that way. And so there's a lot of compute power, raw compute power in there. People have forgotten how to write an assembler and machine level languages of that kind. Today, even operating systems used to be written in Pascal. They're written in all sorts of languages, whereas we wrote them in machine code in the good old days. So, let me put it this way. A greeting card that says happy birthday to you when you open it has more compute power than an IBM 370. So, just to put it in perspective.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And also to your point, compute power in itself is not going away, but we are potentially moving in an age of, of course, thin client as we know it. So it's, the device in your hand becomes less and less of a processor in many ways, and that power moves to the cloud. So whether it's an FPGA or whatever you have in a virtualized environment, but at the end of the day, you still have to pay the piper in some way. So that processing power has to be there. It's just a matter of where it resides. Does it reside in your hand or does it reside in the data center? Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. And I tell people when they come to me and talk about what should we look for in the future, whether you're industry or IT or whatever, I keep telling them that, and I'm using the words that Dr. James Martin used to say, when you look at compute power, think of it as infinite, pervasive, and free. Just think of the world that way, and then look at what you're doing in your product and see how it would fit into a world where bandwidth is infinite, pervasive, and free. Now, don't take them literally, but even today, what you're doing, all these video calls on WhatsApp, they're free, right? So you're going to see more and more of this starting to come. When I say pervasive, you're talking of, I want every village in the world to have high bandwidth. And so it's infinite and pervasive and sort of free. I think look at the world that way when you look at a product for the future, and you'll probably be looking at it right.
Got it. And Arjun, let me ask you a question on your vision, your next 5 to 10 year vision of how the IT industry evolves in India. Where do you see the most growth, and how do you see this sort of playing out? So you've again gone from IT service, generic services, BPO, now the move to the cloud. What is India's role in this, and how does it play out? It sounds like healthcare and healthcare initiatives and biotech and nanotech, these are some of the ones you identified. But maybe dig a little bit deeper into what this implies for India. Thanks.
So I think what we have become very good at is process and project management and stuff like that. I mean, we obviously need to improve and will keep improving in that area. But I think we are considered very good in that particular area. I think the second thing we need to look at is domain. We are still not the experts. I mean, I'm still not at a level that Accenture can talk about, except in certain niche areas and some companies. But I think we have to become domain specific, much more domain specific than we are today, and look at value add. I think it's no longer cost saving. Cost savings are always important. Cost arbitrage is very important, and we will have cost savings, I think we have to look at value add. And the best example I can give is if people follow history, follow the textile industry and see how it moved and why it moved. And I think you will look at IT at exactly the same way. I think the big advantage, the difference is in textile industry, you needed investment to set up mills. Here, I need people. People are the sort of asset that I need. And countries like India and China have big assets. Our biggest advantage really is we speak English compared to the Chinese. And so obviously we will have a lot of, our education infrastructure is not too bad. A lot can be improved. And I think we are already starting to talk about skilling. And so the minute I make my engineers better, we just don't have to depend on a handful of colleges to produce really good engineers. If I can do it in 20 odd IITs and another 30, 40 NITs, why can't I do it in 200-300 other colleges? If we can do that and we can get our skilling up, people like NIT and all, if we can do good programmers who come skilled as programmers, run good MCA classes or courses, I should say, I think you will be the hub for the world for software. And ultimately, software is going to rule the world. It is, everything is going to be dependent on software, whether it's medicine. And as my domestic market opens up, I will start making products that are relevant not just to India, but all over the world. It's something we've been talking about for a long time. We are doing some good work in that area. We just haven't seen any big, unicorns coming out of there, but they will come. They will come. I think if we have the patience and we do what's relevant for us over a period of time, especially in areas like medicine. I am a great believer that, in the medical area, we will probably take out some world-leading products, not in a shorter time frame. We have very good doctors. We have very good engineers. We have a largest number of patients in the world in some ways. We have more diseases than anyone else, it seems. And so we should be able to get our act together and find really good analytical solutions, other solutions for things like that. And we have the data now. And so it's time that starts happening over the next few years.
And it sounds like what you're also saying is we need more of a focus on R&D because we have the manpower, the brain power, and the general infrastructure built in terms of the educational institutions, one of which you yourself founded, the G.S. Sanyal School of Telecommunication at IIT. So that was an amazing initiative. But you have that infrastructure now. Now it's a matter of putting the brain power to work and getting more R&D up and running. Is that the way to go now?
Absolutely. And getting, look at the US, if I just follow this example, things like DARPA and all have actually been the basis of a lot of innovation that has come out. And I think the more industry, university collaboration that happens, the better off we are going to be in terms of getting better technology to industry and getting, people in academics trained to be more relevant to industry, because students will get trained automatically. Professors won't sit in their little ivory tower saying, all I've got to do is teach. I work with some of the IITs very closely. The problem today is that they want the IITs to do research. Professors in IITs want to do research, but and the government is pushing more students to go to IIT. So Kharagpur, which I know, when I was there, we had 2,500 students. Today it has 12,500 students, supposed to go up to 25,000. They already are 40% short on their faculty numbers. They're 40% vacancies. So the professors are saying, all I'm doing is teaching. I don't have time to do any research. And that's a big problem. And so, it's not just we have to solve one problem. There are lots of problems we have to solve. And we need to find a way to solve them. Don't have the answers, but if we work towards it, and again, the problem is not going to solve itself today. We have to plan today. So, there's a program that one of our alumni who's at the University of Oklahoma is running or wants to run is called Faculty for the Future. And so he's given a program to IIT Kharagpur where you can produce, say, 10 years from now, we'll have more faculty access than we have now. But that's how you've got to look at some of these issues. And unfortunately, governments don't look at them in those timeframes. So I think it's up to us to start investing some of our donations or whatever into doing some of these things that might make a difference in the long term.
Arjun, this was eye-opening and really useful. So thank you so much for your time. I could go on, but we are on the hour. So I'm going to hand it over to Tarun here to say a few words. And I see Sam is also signed on here, Samir. So over to them.
Arjun, thank you very much. You've traversed 5 decades so easily and comfortably over the last 60 minutes, and perhaps even 7, because you really talked about the future as well. As we've come up onto the hour, it's been wonderful. Your predictions, I'm fairly certain, are very relevant for everybody who's listening to this conversation. It's based on an incredible amount of experience that you've had. It's been a great privilege listening to you. Thank you very much for this conversation. And Shubho, what can I say? Fabulous, as always. I think you are definitely going to be our moderator for many, many more DOSCO talks. Thank you so much, Shubho, for taking the time. Amit, thank you as well for putting this together. Over to Sam.
Thank you so much, Arjun, for doing this. I think this is the first time we had someone from the tech world give a DOSCO talk. Really an eye-opener. I think we can sometime prevail upon you to do a little app for the DSOBS, maybe some link up with telemedicine or something. I don't know. That's what came to my mind when you were talking about that. But more on that later. Thank you so much, Shubho. Thank you so much, Amit. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Tarun.
Thank you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you at the next round of DOSCO Talks. Arjun will be sending you a link, which will be for the YouTube channel.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone. And Sam, yes, I'll work with you on that. We do have a program, and I'll extend it to all the DOSCOs and their families, basically. And that might, let's see how it works. Okay.
That'll be fantastic, sir. That'll be really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Very kind. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Yeah.
Have a great Sunday. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.